Alexander of Macedon operated as a multi-scalar systems architect, systematically dismantling and rebuilding the political geometry of the ancient world. Engineering an empire creates massive friction. The highly adaptable methods Alexander developed to break the Persian state proved toxic to his own Macedonian veterans. This map traces the sheer logistical scale of his problem. Stretching over 3,000 miles from Greece to India, sustaining a military apparatus across specific pressure points, Tyre, Gaugamela, Susa, and the Hyophases River, required precise administrative integration. Alexander deployed cultural syncretism as his primary stability mechanism, deliberately fusing Greek and Persian political systems to maintain control over millions of new subjects. To understand why this strategy triggered a total breakdown in discipline among the greatest army in history, we first have to examine how Alexander solved physical problems on the battlefield. He engineered a cosmopolitan empire through precise tactical and psychological adjustments. Yet those exact socio-political tools placed an intolerable strain on his own core command, leading to its collapse. In 331 BCE, at Gaugamela, the Persian king Darius III presented a specific mechanical problem. He leveled the battlefield terrain to maximize the efficiency of his heavy, mechanized units. Those units were scythed chariots. Charging across flat, unbroken ground, they were designed to slice through infantry formations with devastating kinetic energy. Look at this tactical schematic of the Macedonian phalanx. Instead of bracing for impact, Alexander instructed his infantry to abandon their rigid structure and adopt a fluid, open-rank formation. As the charge approached, the phalanx simply stepped aside. They created open lanes, allowing the chariots to pass harmlessly through the lines, where they lost momentum and were isolated by light troops. Neutralizing the mechanized threat disrupted the cohesion of the Persian offensive, creating a sudden gap in their defensive line. Alexander recognized the geometric shift instantly, driving his companion cavalry straight into the fracture. Years later, the Macedonian army advanced into the Indian subcontinent, encountering an environment that demanded a total reset of that battlefield logic. Crossing the jagged passes of the Hindu Kush Mountains introduced geographical isolation completely removed from their Mediterranean supply lines. At the Hydaspes River, they faced a new defensive variable. Instead of mechanized chariots, King Porus deployed biological heavy armor, war elephants. The massive animals terrified the Macedonian horses, rendering traditional cavalry maneuvers useless. Alexander had to invent novel infantry countermeasures in real time, relying on light troops to target the mahouts and harass the animals until they panicked and trampled their own lines. His military dominance relied on this active, fluid manipulation of battlefield geometry and enemy momentum, treating every engagement as a dynamic problem to be solved. That same adaptive logic applied to his macro strategy. Moving down the Mediterranean coast, Alexander needed to neutralize the dominant Persian navy by dismantling its land-based ports. The city of Tyre presented a massive physical obstacle. Built on an island protected by heavy walls and the surrounding sea, it defied conventional siege mechanics. Look at this 3D model showing his solution. If the sea protected the island, he would simply remove the sea. He ordered the construction of a massive stone and timber causeway, artificially connecting Tyre to the mainland. When Tyrian forces deployed fire ships to burn the construction, Alexander adapted his engineering. He widened the causeway and erected massive defensive towers at the front lines to shield his workers from projectiles. Once the land bridge reached the island, he rolled towering siege engines across the newly built peninsula, battering the walls until the city was breached. The physical destruction of Tyre carried a devastating psychological payload. Demonstrating that an island could be forcefully annexed to the continent shattered the morale of other resisting coastal cities. Alexander treated geography as a malleable variable. He proved to the ancient world that natural defenses would yield to sheer administrative and logistical willpower. This capacity for physical adaptation was rooted in his intellectual foundation.
Tutored by the philosopher Aristotle, Alexander was taught to observe, classify, and manipulate the natural world. He approached his campaigns with scientific rigor, dispatching botanical specimens and detailed geographic surveys from deep within Asia back to Greek academies for study. He also maintained a deep connection to Hellenic literary tradition, carrying an annotated copy of Homer's Iliad to serve as his ideological blueprint for heroism. But as his borders expanded, his role shifted from conquering general to imperial architect. Defeated rulers like Porus and the surviving family of Darius were integrated into his administrative framework with full diplomatic courtesy. To secure ideological compliance from his new subjects, he took profound risks. By crossing the harsh Libyan desert to the Siwa oasis, the Oracle of Amun recognized his claim to divine parentage, granting him a pharaonic mandate in Egypt. He sought to stabilize the empire by physically blending its demographics. During the mass weddings at Susa, he ordered nearly 100 of his top officers to marry Persian noblewomen in a deliberate attempt to breed a hybridized ruling elite. He further integrated himself by adopting elements of Persian court dress and ceremony, mirroring the cultural aesthetics of the subjects he now governed. This created a severe ideological clash. The Greeks expected their king to be a grounded leader, fighting alongside them, while the Persians expected an absolute, unapproachable, divine monarch. Alexander applied Aristotelian logic to the architecture of statecraft, attempting to engineer a multi-ethnic ruling class to solve the problem of long-term imperial stability. Macedonian veterans regarded cultural syncretism as a barbarization of their core identity, rejecting the integration of Persian customs into their military life. The friction fractured the command structure. Violent ruptures emerged, specifically when Alexander executed Callisthenes, Aristotle's own nephew, for refusing to participate in Persian prostration rituals. His psychological control deteriorated. In a drunken argument, he murdered Clitus the Black, the cavalry commander who had previously saved his life, highlighting a terrifying new impulsivity. Amidst the growing internal hostility, Alexander relied heavily on Hephaestion, his closest childhood companion, and the only logistical anchor he completely trusted. When Hephaestion suddenly died of a fever, it removed the final emotional buffer between the increasingly autocratic king and his alienated generals. The breaking point finally arrived at the edges of the known world, standing on the flooded banks of the Hypothesis River. After 8 years of continuous marching through alien climates, his men faced terrible conditions and reports of massive Indian armies waiting on the other side. The tactical machine stopped working. In a breakdown of discipline, the army refused to advance a single step further, forcing the conqueror to turn back. A second mutiny at Opis was even more explicit. The veterans actively rebelled against Alexander's attempt to train and integrate Persian youths into the elite ranks of the Macedonian military. While Alexander possessed the capacity to engineer the capitulation of entire empires, he failed to manage the psychological load and the deeply ingrained cultural prejudices of his own core command. Alexander's genius lay in treating war, civil engineering, and sociology as a single, interconnected system to be solved. Looking at the ruins of Persepolis, you see the scale of the Persian apparatus he managed to dismantle and absorb into his own new infrastructure. Yet his vision of a unified, cosmopolitan world collapsed within the maze-like walls of Babylon, where he died abruptly at age 32. Almost immediately, the political structure of the empire fractured among his generals, dividing the territory into rival kingdoms. However, the vast region survived as a linked cultural and economic zone. Those successor states co-opted his image, minting coins displaying Alexander with the horns of Ammon, using his syncretique legacy to legitimize their own rule. Alexander remains history's greatest architect of military supremacy, but his ultimate failure demonstrates that human psychology and cultural identity resist being engineered as predictably as